What's going on, Newborn Nation? Newbornkilik here, welcoming you to a list of 10 Zelda theories that just might change the way you look at the Zelda franchise. Now please bear in mind these aren't necessarily my theories, just a collection of theories that I think are rather interesting, and I figured you all would be interested in hearing about them. Now I'm not going to leave any of my theories on this list because that's very conceited and really no fun. But if you'd like to check them out, they will be in the description, or there'll be an end card at the end. As a note, please bear in mind these aren't in a top 10 order necessarily, but just in an order that kind of makes sense for the progression of the different theories, as some of them do kind of tie together. So kicking off our list, we have one that probably a lot of people kind of wish is true, and that is that Navi dies at the end of Ocarina of Time. Now, if you played Ocarina of Time, you would know how annoying Navi can be, but at the same time, does anyone really want her dead? So the main evidence to support this theory is the fact that Navi just kind of leaves at the end of Ocarina of Time. This has caused a lot of fans to speculate that a fairy's lifespan is actually pretty short, and that Navi might have been on the last half of her lifespan. Bear in mind, she was already in really good graces with the Great Deku Tree. That doesn't exactly happen right out of the womb, or fairy womb. However, we're not theorizing on how that works. So this next one's actually pretty interesting, and it is the idea that rupees are actually energy. They're not necessarily stones, they're kind of like small amounts of different energies that can be transferred between rupees. I mean, think about it. How can Link carry around all these rupees other than just, the magic bag of holding that apparently he has? So this theory would mean that there's probably some sort of energy collection system inside of the wallets of a different size depending on which wallet you had, and then you just kind of touch the rupees to this energy collection source, maybe, a massive rupee, or like a very, one that's definitely meant to collect all of the different types of energy. And then when you wanted to buy something with rupees, you would just give them that part of the energy. Honestly, at first I was kind of lukewarm about this theory, but magic is in play in Hyrule Kingdom. It's not something super common, but I don't know how a cell phone works. It seems like magic, but I know it's just technology. And for all we know, maybe the Sheikah made it before they went extinct during the war. Now this next theory is really a bummer. It's the idea that Skull Kid actually killed Epona. If we look at the evidence to support this theory, his wording when he says that he quote-unquote got rid of Epona. I mean, when you say you're getting rid of something, it's not like he just let it go. He got rid of Epona. There are actually a couple of other interesting ideas that probably went over our heads as children or even as adults playing this game. If you remember, Link doesn't remember Epona's song, the song to call Epona, obviously. So he has to be taught that song. But why would anyone at that ranch know the song to call your horse? So naturally, the implications of this are that you just found a horse that looks almost exactly like Epona, but is actually just a horse that this ranch happens to have, hence why they would know how to call that horse. Okay, so we're going to step away from death for a little bit and talk about the Gerudo, and how the Gerudo may potentially reproduce through what is known as GYNOGENESIS. Basically what GYNOGENESIS is, without nerding out on you, GYNOGENESIS is basically cloning. The only problem with this is, a lot of times when cloning through a female source, the male DNA usually isn't actually carried over, hence why sometimes they have to leave the village to basically, get male DNA, if you catch my drift. On top of that, it is to my understanding that sometimes the male DNA is actually carried over in very rare cases, hence why a male may only be born once every 100 years. Now next we have a very interesting one that is kind of backed by some of the lore in the games, and that is that the sages died or have to die to become sages. So on the surface that sounds very strange, but hear me out. Once a sage is, committed to being a sage, we never see them outside of the chamber of the sages. I mean, there are many reasons why this could be, but one of the most interesting parts about the sages is that, if you remember, Darunia actually goes into the boss's chambers in the Fire Temple to fight before you do. He's never seen after that except for in the Chamber of the Sages. Since we don't see him actually fighting with us, it's kind of not that weird to assume that he probably died and was either resurrected to become a sage, or maybe his life essence is just kind of there. It could be that maybe they're not necessarily dead, they just kind of ascend, but they're still not of the world of living necessarily. Another fun theory is that Super Mario Bros. 3 is actually a famous play in Hyrule. It's kind of a common theory that Super Mario Bros. 3 is actually a stage play, given the intro sequence, we can see, there's a stage and they draw the curtains, and it's kind of like a reproduction of, some of Mario's past adventures. But the Happy Mask salesman actually has a Mario and a Bowser mask on his back. Now, these could just be Easter eggs. As people who like to theorize about video games, there are no just simple Easter eggs, only these convoluted connections to other universes that totally were meant to be taken seriously. All right, everyone, cliche alert for this one. This is super common knowledge. You've probably heard this one 1,000 times, but it's the theory that Link is actually dead in Majora's Mask. The premise of Majora's Mask isn't really that strange in the Zelda universe, so we can write that off. But there is the whole Link falling down this huge pit and just happens to land safely on a flower. That's kind of weird. I'm going to go ahead and lump this in with the theory that Majora's Mask is actually the 5 stages of grief. If you want more information on that, I'd highly recommend you look it up. But basically, there are the 5 stages of grief, and there are actually a lot of things that tie into, the story or certain characters specifically in the correct order, but I'll let you look that one up because it's actually a pretty interesting read. Next, we have the fact that Zelda may have a schizophrenic sister. If you remember in Twilight Princess, there is a bug lady named Agitha. She's very rich, obviously. She never talks about a job. She never talks about any source of income. Just assume that she's rich somehow. Just randomly rich. You would think at some point they might mention, oh, her father's like the king's secretary or something like that, but they never really bring it up to my knowledge. So what exactly is bringing people to believe that Agitha is Zelda's sister? Well, there's the whole money situation. She's dressed very regally. It's very obvious that she's doing quite well for herself, despite not having any kind of notable income. She definitely believes that she is one with these bugs. She believes that these bugs are, more than just bugs to her, and that's kind of a common schizophrenic thing, is to actually believe things that are not real. I mean, this is so far as to the point that when Wolf Link approaches her, she's just like, oh, you look like a cute puppy, instead of being terrified like everyone else in the town. So these last 2 theories are somewhat interchangeable, but I went ahead and separated them out because the last one interests me a lot, and I believe I'll actually be doing a theory about that one. But number 9 here is that the Forest Temple is actually a stronghold from the Hyrulean Civil War. This makes a lot of sense. It's very defensible. It's very difficult to get into through, they have a maze, they have the Lost Woods right there. One wrong turn and you're basically turned all the way back around. You have to start back over. So an attacking army would be just basically at a loss. They'd have to luckily get through or take a very specific path, a very defensible and specific path to get even to the Sacred Forest Meadow. On top of that, even once they got through the Sacred Forest Meadow, there are multiple choke points, a maze where, they could fire down onto their enemies that are attacking, all the while they have really no way to fight back. They just kind of have to take those casualties, and then the last line of defense is this narrow passage that they have to basically attack directly through. That is super defensible. And once you actually get inside in certain parts of this courtyard, if you look up, you can actually see kind of like the castle design. I'm not exactly sure what that's called. I don't remember for sure, but look at any castle, you're going to see this kind of design here. I'll try and show it on screen. And actually, if you look in the courtyard, if you look up, you can see that through the Forest Temple as well. All right, so here we come to the final one, and the one that I probably want to take a look at more in depth than what I'm going to right now. Temples in Ocarina of Time are actually remnants of a holy war. If you take into consideration that most of the temples are actually places of worship of one kind or another, think the Spirit Temple, potentially the Shadow Temple, depending on what kind of school of, ideology you subscribe to about that place. A lot of these temples are very defensible positions, kind of like, commanding stations, main bases for the different tribes. And bear in mind that at one point Hyrule was in a civil war. So it could be that these different religious groups were eventually eradicated and their temples are just left behind, eventually bringing about the unification of Hyrule. And if you've seen any of my theories already, I'm sure you already know my thoughts about the royal family and their eradication of entire populations. So to me, that seems absolutely plausible. Anyway, what are your top 10 Zelda theories? Let me know in the comments down below. Maybe I'll take a look at them. I'd love to do another fan-created top 10 list of some of your awesome theories. If there are any theories that maybe I got a little bit wrong or that I should look into, definitely let me know. I am super into this kind of thing, so More input is better. And if you have any of your own personal theories, let me know in the comments below. Just real quick, I want to give a shout out to my patrons, George Kasner III, Mark Comer, and Emai. You are all awesome, and thank you so much for supporting the Newborn Nation. I greatly appreciate it. And if you would like to join these three on Patreon and help me make videos for all of you, more theories, etc., etc., I will leave a link on screen or down below. You can check me out. Anyway, I'm Newbornkilik, and I will see you in the next one. I'm out.